Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a nice day. Now, a super common question that we used to get a lot in the past is whether or not we should still learn the older Objective-C programming language now that Swift is available, right? Well, the answer to this question you can easily find by just looking at a couple of different postings online for, different jobs that you can get at various corporations. So for example, if you go on Facebook's website and look at the full-time iOS job posting, you can kind of see that a very important requirement is to actually know Objective-C, and then there's C++ and Swift that you also have to learn. So in 2018, it's still very relevant to actually know Objective-C. Now in today's video, I wanted to kind of show you how to get started by building a brand new single view app and then constructing a list view, which will kind of look like this. And we're going to be using a UITableView controller to construct this. We will also go through how to use these header and implementation files to kind of build out our project. And by going through this example, hopefully you can kind of see how easy it actually is to program in Objective-C. It's actually very similar to Swift. So with that being said, let's go ahead and see how we can construct this new project in Xcode right now. All right, everyone, in today's coding session, I would like to start off by creating a brand new single view application using Xcode. And let me just go over this dialog one step at a time. And the thing we want to create is a single view app. You want to make sure that the language that you are toggled on is Objective-C instead of Swift, because that's the language we are going to be programming in today. For the product name, I'm going to call it Objective-C Getting Started. You can feel free to call it whatever you want and create this project inside of your computer somewhere, and you should be good to go. So let me go ahead and change it to the iPhone 10 and try to run my application to see what I get inside of the simulator over there. So we basically have a white screen that is being rendered using this view controller file over here. So we have a couple of different files in Objective-C. We have header and implementation files for .h and .m. And a lot of this code in here is very similar to Swift. We have view.load and also this memory warning function that, we always delete because we don't really care about it too much. And this class is pretty much what you're seeing right now. And the first thing I would like to modify inside of this application is to turn my view controller into some kind of list that kind of looks like this over here, right? So this is a UITableView controller, and it has a couple of cells in it that represents a couple of different course objects. So let's see how we can actually modify our Objective-C code. Well, the first thing you want to do is to go inside of viewController.h, and instead of subclassing UIViewController, you can subclass UITableView controller instead. Now, once you make this change and you try to run your code, the application should crash because you're going to see this little warning or error down at the very bottom. And the crash occurs because the storyboard is trying to load your view controller, but it's subclassing view controller instead. So if you look at the storyboard, this thing is actually subclassing view controller over here. And so we are going to fix this problem by bypassing the storyboard entirely. And let me show you how to actually configure your application to start off with a manual window that you construct yourself. So inside of appdelegate.m and inside of did finish launching with options, you just want to create your window manually by saying self.window, and you want to set it equal to something. And inside of Objective-C, you can create your objects a couple of different ways. And let me show you the easiest way, which is to use uiWindow.new, and that's very similar to Swift open paren and paren. And the next thing you have to do for your window is to say self.window, and you want to make it visible by calling make key and visible. And so in Objective-C, you want to make sure your method calls are all kind of wrapped with these two brackets. And at the very end of your code, you have to hit a semicolon. And the final thing you have to do inside of your did finish launching with options method is to set the self.window.rootView controller like this. Now the root view controller, I'm going to set it as a UI navigation controller. And the way you create a new instance of this class in Objective-C is to use alloc like that. And you want to call another method called init with root view controller over here. All right. So what is this root view controller thing on the right side? Well, I'm going to create a new instance of view controller. So you can just say view controller. And you see how you don't have this view controller class available in the autocomplete. The reason is because inside of Objective-C, you have to import all of your header files before these classes are available to you. So let's just go ahead and do that. And now if you type in view controller, you see that it is available in the autocomplete. And for this guy, you can either use alloc dot or alloc init or just use .new. This is a little bit easier, so I'll just use that and make sure to end it with a semicolon over there. And now if you run your application, you should be able to see your table view being rendered out inside of your view controller simulator over here. So you should see those little horizontal lines, and something else that you can do is to give this guy a title. So inside of view controller view.load, you can say something like navigation item. So you have to say self.navigation item to access the instance properties. And you can say title on this guy and say courses. And make sure to end this with a semicolon. And for Objective-C, all your strings have to start out with this @ symbol over there. So make sure you don't forget that. And if you want to set your application with large titles such as this over here, you have to modify the navigation bar on your controller. So self.navigation controller.navigation, I believe this is bar and prefers large titles equals, I believe you can say yes like that. So once you have these two changes over here, you'll see the large courses title in your navigation controller. And there you go. You pretty much set up a brand new Objective-C project so that you can construct your window manually and also subclass a UITableView controller. All right, so with that being done, let's move on to constructing a couple of different cells for your table view so that you can kind of get this list going over here. And it's actually pretty easy, and it's extremely similar to Swift. And the couple of things that you have to actually override inside of view controller, which is your table view controller subclass, is I believe number of rows in section. So this is number of section. I think I want number of rows in section over here. So you want to make sure you end it with these two open braces, and the number of rows you can return anything you want. And so let's just return a value of 10 and semicolon. And the return value is kind of specified by this type over here. So it's NS integer, and this is a integer over there. So everything matches up correctly. Now the next thing you have to provide is the cell for row at index path, and that's this method over here. Okay. So for this guy, you want to make sure that you dequeue a cell from your table view. So you can say table view. And again, for Objective-C, you call your methods using a space and just say dequeue like that. And I believe I want to use this guy over here. So we have the string identifier, and then we have the index path, which is this guy. So copy that and paste that in there. The cell ID, you can actually call it using a raw string like this. So we'll just do this for now. And you want to make sure you end your method call with these two brackets and a semicolon over here. And for this dequeue, it actually returns you a cell that you have to return from this function. So what I mean is you want to say something like UITableView cell, and you want to say star cell equals all of that. And then finally, you just want to return that cell that you declared right above over here. And so let me just get some extra spaces down below. And the thing about Objective-C is that whenever you declare your variables, you have to specify the type. So this is the type over here. And for objects in Objective-C, you want to make sure you use a star like that. And this is kind of what we call a pointer. It's kind of confusing, and luckily inside of Swift, you don't have to do this anymore because you have something called type inference, which tells you exactly what the types are based on what's on the right side over here. And so if you try to run your application now, I believe it should crash because we haven't really registered a cell with this cell ID object thing over here. So let's go ahead and do that inside of table view. So let's just do this right off the bat with UI, let's see, table view. And you want to call this method called register. And there's a lot of different methods that you can use. I'm going to use this one with a class and a reuse identifier. So this class over here, you can just say UITableView cell.class, and I believe in Swift it's called self, so make sure to use class instead. And for this guy, you want to make sure you're using the same string as you are calling down below. So let's just paste that in there. End your method call with a bracket and semicolon. And then now you can run your app again. So I'm going to modify the cell's background color to be something like UI color.red color, like so, semicolon, and run your app one more time. I noticed that the autocomplete for Objective-C is actually faster than Swift, so that's one advantage of using Objective-C. And so now you have your 10 red cells over here. They're actually separated by a horizontal line. And the other thing that you can do is to say cell.textLabel.text equals, course name or whatever you want to say over here. And you want to make sure that you put an @ sign over here, otherwise your application will not compile. And so there you go. You are going to see course name inside of each one of your rows right over here. So let me just remove the background color because I don't want to see it anymore. And a couple of things that you want to fix here is this raw cell ID string over here. You don't want to just type it in like that because it's very error prone if you modify this guy to say like lowercase ID and they no longer match. And if you run your app again, it's going to crash. So one way to fix this is to go inside of your view controller, your implementation area over here, and just declare a new string up above. So you can say cell ID or whatever you want to call this guy, and let it equal to cell ID. And this variable over here is kind of local to the scope of this controller, this implementation over here. So you can just use cell ID. So if you type it in over here, you'll see the auto completion appear. And this cell ID, you want to just paste that in there as well. And let me see if I can say const like that. Does that work? I believe that should be okay. Let me see what this guy is doing. And I don't think it likes the const, so let me just remove that and run my code again. And you'll see that the cell ID is now being used instead of the raw string over here. So you can modify this to be whatever you want. And there you go, we have our list of 10 cells that say course name for each one of the rows. So now that we have our list going over here, why don't we move on to creating some model objects for our Objective-C project, right? So the reason why we create model objects is to make it easier for us to kind of encapsulate an entire object for one of our rows. So I'm going to create a course object that has maybe 2 or 3 properties, maybe the name and also the number of lessons. So we have 49, 39, and so on and so forth. So the way I'm going to do this is to right click on the directory thing over there, create a new file. And the easiest way of doing this is to create a brand new Cocoa Touch class. And you want to make sure you subclass something called NSObject. And the class name, we are going to give it course and just hit enter or next down there and create this somewhere inside of your project. And what you'll end up with are 2 files over here, the .h and the .m for the implementation. And I'm going to create some custom properties on this course object. And what you have to do is to type in some special syntax called property. And over here, you want to say strong and non-atomic over here. Otherwise, it's not going to work correctly. And the actual property type, you declare right over here as NSString. And then the property name, you just want to give it name like so. All right, so there's a lot to explain in this one line, but I feel like it's kind of out of scope for today's video. So I'm just going to leave it as that. And the other property we are going to create is this one over here, so number of lessons. And why don't we just copy this over here and paste that down below. And over here, because this guy, this number of lessons should be an integer, right? The first attempt that you make to declare this property might be NSInteger. And you want to give this the name of number of lessons. And if you try to build this, it doesn't exactly work because this NSInteger isn't exactly a class inside of Objective-C. So instead of using that, we'll just use an NSNumber instead, which is an object wrapper for primitive scalar numeric values. And using NSNumber should give you a project that actually compiles, and everything should be okay. You can run your project and everything is just going to render out correctly. And now what we want to do is to go back to our viewController.m file and construct an array so that we can actually return the number of items based on that array instead of just, returning a raw value of 10. And so what we want to do is to create some kind of property in this class that holds the array of courses. So there's one way of doing it, which is to create it inside of here. So you can say ns array and star courses and just hit semicolon, right? But you don't exactly want to do this, and instead you want to create a property on this instance instead up here instead of this interface end area. And the way that you want to do this is to use that property syntax again as a strong and non-atomic. And inside of here, you can say ns array, and you can say courses right over here. So the difference is that when you declare a property in here, it actually belongs to this class. And so right inside of UITLoad, you can say self.courses, and that'll be accessible like that. And this is the proper way of doing this, I believe. So the course object, you can actually do something else, which is to declare the type for your array as well. So you can just use this generic syntax, and you want to type in course, right? So you want to also import course first, so course.h. This makes it so that course is available over here, and just end it with the greater sign right over there, and you should be okay. So the problem with this is that you actually need a star, so fix it with that star over there. I don't really like that extra space, but I guess that's the default convention to follow. And now that you have an array of courses, you want to make sure that you return the number of rows in section to be, let's see, courses. So you don't see that available. You see this guy down over here, but you want to say self.courses instead, and just use count and try to run your code again. So because our array is currently empty, you don't see any rows inside of your cell over here. So what we're going to do is to add some objects onto courses inside of UITLoad. And so how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to say courses, so self.courses, and we're going to call the method of add object. So we don't exactly see that in here because ns array is not modifiable. So you want to modify this and use ns mutable array instead, and now add object is available. So let's see, how exactly do we create a course object? Well, it's pretty easy by just saying course and star course, and you want to say course.new, like so. Now you can also say course and course equals course alloc init, which is the older way of doing things. So I believe this and this they do exactly the same thing, but because this is actually less typing, I prefer to use this instead. Now this course object, you can say course.name equals Instagram Firebase, and let's end the quote, use a semicolon, and I believe you have to use the @ something that I always forget now that I've been programming in Swift for such a long time. And so over here you can try to say something like 49 for the number of lessons, and maybe that'll work. So you see that you can't really convert a 49 to an NS number type. And so the way that this works, I believe you can say @ and 49. And is that the way you do that? I haven't really programmed in Objective-C for a while, and I believe that works. So now you can finally add this course object onto your array and end that method call with a bracket and semicolon. Now, one last thing that you have to do before you start seeing any courses inside of your list over here is to make sure that you instantiate your course object above as a new instance of an array. So the way you want to do this is to say self.courses equal to maybe ns mutable array.new, and you should be all right. Everything looks good. I'm going to run my application one more time. You should be able to see something inside of my list. So we have one object inside of this table view. If you go down to the bottom right here inside of self or row, you can simply say something like course, and course equals self.courses, and use bracket and index path.row. And then for this string over here, you can obviously change it to course.name, and you'll be able to get the actual name instead of your row. So you can kind of see how very, very easy it is to construct your objects inside of Objective-C. Now, if you wanted to clean up some of this code over here, let's remove this comment, and let's say we want to move all of this inside of a setup method, right? You can go right below and declare a new method, and I'm going to return a void type, which means that you don't have to return anything. And we are going to say setup courses, And I believe we just have to end it with a brace. And inside of this method, we will just copy this code over here, cut that and paste that in there. And inside of UITableLoad, we can now call self and set up courses and end this guy with a semicolon, run your code again, and everything should work just the same as it did before. We've just cleaned up some of the code by refactoring it away instead of a separate method. All right, everyone, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video on how to get started using the Objective-C programming language. And hopefully going through today's exercise can shed some light on how to actually program with this older language. Now, I'm going to record another lesson or two on how to consume JSON as well as how to design our cells inside of our list. So make sure to subscribe to the channel for those videos later on. If you want the source code for today's project, make sure to head down in the description below for the link. And if you want to learn about how to develop some applications using Swift, make sure to check out the courses below. That's going to be it for today. I will see you in the very next lesson. Bye-bye, guys.